All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the training update. So, this is the training that we did for midterm training. If you missed that, or for the new folks, if you want to watch this again, and I will kind of get a little more specific. We won't go through the whole show like last time. But speaking of shows, this midterm training is themed the halftime show because we are halfway through the semester that's going to lead us to summer and get a break. So we'll see how that goes. Even if you're working this summer, it's usually pretty relaxed. So we'll keep that in mind as we get closer to the time. But for now, let's talk about some important stuff that you'll need to know in the immediate future. By the way, if you weren't there, you'll see that everybody had their picture used in some embarrassing way related to a Super Bowl halftime show. So we'll talk about some announcements, some open link etiquette, and we'll talk about an idea called ER triage, persuasion in general. More specifically, we'll talk about Monroe's motivated sequence. We'll talk briefly about special occasion speeches. We'll talk about how to use the FBI, or as you may call it, the bad boyfriend negotiation tactic to get folks to come back in for a follow-up appointment. And last, we'll just touch on PowerPoint. No, there's not a PowerPoint on PowerPoint yet. That'll be later for the new folks. So, announcements. Here are a few. So first of all, training is going really well. Landon is clear. She is doing her own thing. I think that things with Brady and Hannah are going well. So I would imagine another week maybe or so, and everybody will be ready to have their meeting, and we'll get you on the books. Let me know as soon as you get your basic requirements met. Brady and Hannah, let me know. See me on here or send me an email or whatever, and we'll get you in for a meeting. I think we're having a better atmosphere this semester than last because of that open access area that we have where the cameras are on and we can see each other. It just seems much more like reality used to be. Be aware that persuasive speeches are starting soon. I think Dr. Johnstone's already in hers, more on her in a second, but sort of switch your mindset up. Most of the 201 professors are now about to move from informative speaking to persuasive speaking. So, the times that you spent telling students, hey, don't be persuasive, just be informative, that's gone. And now you can tell them just to go for it as long as they have a logical argument. More on all that. Dr. Johnstone had asked that we do not recommend her students to use questions as attention getters. She said that it seems like everyone was just doing that as though that's the only thing they were told. I know you didn't do that. It's the easiest one, right? So if we give them the options and we say, well, you could use questions, you could use a story, or you could use a fact or statistic. Well, fact or a stat, you got to find it. Story, you've got to write it or find it. Questions are pretty easy and quick. So she doesn't want that. You should let your clients for Dr. Johnstone know, even though she's already told them, don't go that route. Try something else. And the last two here, Book It and Google Meet issues. If you're having any issues with anything, or you run across something you don't understand, I know for the new folks, you're still in training and you shouldn't know everything. I don't know everything. And I helped design it, and it's not wonderful yet. It's getting there, and it will be. But your feedback is important. So if you have any issues with Book It or Google Meet, let me know, and I'll try to get those addressed for you. All right, speaking of the open link that has, I think, made a better atmosphere, Leah's going to tell us about this one. So what that does, it simulates reality, but do be aware that it's public. So anyone, not just us, can click on the homepage of the Speech Lab and in they go, right? They're right there with us. They don't have to ask to join. They just have to join. So that's like in the Speech Lab, opening the front door and walking in. And that's what I wanted with that. So remember, cameras on, clothes, just, again, look professional enough to not have them doubt your credibility. But you also want to dress in a way that's going to invite them to think, you're going to think you're inviting or approachable, right? You're not stuffy and stiff. You don't want to suit it up. And then last, closets really is just I wanted triple C's there, but closets, what I mean there is just your background. What's behind you? Are you don't lay in bed? Are you laying in bed? Don't lay in bed. Are you laying down? Don't lay down. So make sure that you look, again, credible. That's the only thing. I want you to be relaxed. I want you to chill, but I we got to be credible in a way that we appear to other people, so that they don't doubt us and then don't take our advice, and then they have a poor performance. They blame us for it. It's nasty. So let's not go down that road. Most of the people that come into the open link are going to be there for either a drop-in or to ask a question. And if that's the case, just handle it and move from there. What I will tell you is that if you are working with someone who comes in to schedule an appointment or a drop-in appointment, my advice would be to walk them through how to do it, but have them do it. So to be clear here, you don't want to tell them to leave our room. What I would say is something along the lines of, all right, so stay here in your Google Meet tab that you've got open, but in a different tab, go back to our homepage and let me know when you're there. Okay, now click on the drop-in check-in button. You see that? Okay, good. Now sign in with your Blackboard information. You doing that one? Good. They can share their screen with you if they want. That's good. You might even ask, do you want to share your screen, or if they have trouble, you can help them that way. Sign in. Here's where you click. Here's where you do this. Here's where you do the other thing, right? And that's going to teach them to do it, so in the future they can do it on their own. But, that's one of the reasons we're here, is to help them with that, especially our front desk folks when we have that available. And again, this will be up anytime we're on. It's up all the time, really, except it was like Saturdays I didn't turn it on. But, just be aware that it's possible someone will come in. Now, one other thing with this is that when we move to the knowledge market, we sort of change things a little bit, and it's a little less responsibility, but let me explain to you what's the difference here. So before COVID, we would physically shut down the speech lab in Lake Michigan Hall at 4 p.m. and open in the library at 4 p.m. And since we can't do that anymore, the way we're working the system here is that the knowledge market receptionists are going to be watching the drop-in queue for you. So you don't have to worry about keeping a close eye on that after 4 p.m. Again, that's when we don't have receptionists working for the speech lab. And so, that's one less thing you have to worry about. However, you do need to look for students checking in for appointments. So if they have an appointment booked, you've got an 8 o'clock. 15 till 8, you might start the refresh. Now, again, you can make your page auto refresh. Download an extension. There's some out there that are really good. I recommend whatever browser you're using, like Chrome, Google that. Google Chrome auto refresh extension, and you should be pretty safe there. I know that there was one issue with maybe malware. So if that's the case, beware. But if it's from like the Google store or something like that, it should be free, and you should be safe. All right. So what does this mean for you when there's no one working in the reception position? There's no other person here to watch. Coordinate with one another. Make sure that someone is watching, the front door or whatever it is all the time. And really, probably it's best if you both plan on watching, but if somebody leaves or, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, just remind them. So are you running right now, or am I running it right now? Oh, okay. And have a plan for dealing with this. All right, so that's the open link. It's there. It's open. People are using it, which is good. So just keep an eye on things. Now, Brady is going to tell us about his tattoos, I guess. Brady, you didn't strike me as the type that would have all those tattoos or play a pink Ibanez for that matter. But Brady's going to tell us about ER triage. And so ER, just emergency room, is triage is something that you think of in the medical field, right? So if a patient comes in and they're presenting symptoms of something in an emergency situation, different hospitals do it different ways, but it's all generally this. And that is, I should have changed this already too. Sorry. Breathing should be bleeding. So airway, are they breathing? B, are they bleeding? C, are they conscious? And D, are they dehydrated? A, B, C, D. And this is the order in which they will treat the patient. So breathing's the most important. You can't breathe, you can't live. So let's make sure they're breathing. Next important thing is bleeding. So we want to make sure that, we're stopping any potential bleeding that's there, whether it's internal or external, but obviously externals first. Consciousness. Are they awake? Do we need to wake them up? Do we need to make them unconscious because they've had a brain injury? Whatever. But that's what we're going to deal with next. And then hydration issues is the fourth thing. So, go ahead and hook them up to an IV or get them a drink or wherever they are in the ability to manage that sort of care. For us, I want us to think of our bridge metaphor. And if you're new, this might be new to you as well, but the idea there is that when students come in with very little time before their speech is due, there's not a ton we can do for them. But what we try to do is just get them through it, right? Just help them survive, if you will. And we talk about, if it's no notice, we throw a rope and hope that it holds. If we have a little notice, we can throw a couple ropes and give you a better shot. If we have a lot of notice, we can build you a beautiful bridge like the one behind me and just go crazy. And I know that the new folks have already watched a video on this, so I will not dig in much deeper. But what I will tell you is that we're going to take it this way. Emergency speech lab triage, A, B, C, D. First thing you should do, check that all the elements are present. And by elements, I mean intro, body, conclusion. They don't have to be perfect, but they need to be there, and it needs to be clearly laid out as 3 different parts. If that's the case and it's there, move on to B, body points with transitions. So does the body make sense? Are there main points divided out? Are there transitions between those main points? That's what you should really focus on. If everything's there, let's focus on making sure the body is together first. Then C, content is cited and coherent. So the entirety of the speech, all 3 main parts, is everything flowing? I mean, does it make sense? Do you read something, or do they tell you something from their outline and you're sort of like, what are you thinking? That's what you need to look for there. I mean, it could look pretty on paper, but if you read closely, it could be way off or, make no sense. So make sure that the content is cited, that's important, and coherent. And then if all of that's there, then you can work on D, delivery. And so that's the approach that we're going to take moving forward. Again, the bridge metaphor still works. It's just whatever works best for you. My mind is in medical mode because of COVID and the ongoing situation. So that's how it worked for me when I thought this up. So you can use whichever one you like as long as you basically follow these steps. Start with the most important stuff and work your way out. This is high and low order needs. High order needs need to be dealt with right now. Low order needs can be dealt with in the future, or if you don't have time, they're the ones that you have to let go. It's making a priority list, and this is ours. Now, L will tell us all about persuasion. So with that in mind, sorry, just making my phone stop making noises. What we need to tell people with persuasion is that they should be direct. They don't want to be informative only with this one. If there are informative elements to a persuasive speech, and there always will be, that's fine. But you don't want the audience at any point to really, maybe except the very beginning, guess where you are, which side you're on, what you're advocating for, fighting against. You want to make that clear. And they can do that in the statement of purpose. So you see there, by the end of this speech, you should agree that we should do the thing. By the end of this speech, you should be ready to take this action. By the end of this speech, you should want to go to this place. By the end of this speech, you should make a change in your life, career, profession, recycling habits, pollution, you name it. So make sure that they are not saying things like, by the end of this speech, you should know more about how I feel related to this topic. No. Tell us how you feel. Right there, right? Just from the jump off. Now, when it comes to organizational strategies, there are a few different ones. We're going to talk about 3. Of course, Monroe's is something that we sort of pride ourselves on. It's sort of our deal. But, like for example, again, Dr. Johnstone isn't a huge fan of Monroe's motivated sequence. So as you work with her students, you might let them know that, there are other options out there and they should maybe pursue those. So here are some that might work. The first one is problem solution or problem cause solution, and it's just what it looks like. So if we have problem cause solution, you want to clearly identify what's gone wrong, what caused it to go wrong or why it happened, and then how we fix it. So an example might be global warming or climate change is caused by combustion engines. So what we need then are more electric cars. That seems feasible. That seems right. But then think about it just a little deeper. And this is where your job is so vital, because students often won't think on this next step. They just get what you have on the screen and they're like, great, I'm done. I've got it. This will work. But will global warming or climate change really be solved by electric cars? They could be a part of it, but maybe not. Now, here's another one. Climate change is caused by carbon pollution. And so what we need are carbon caps, meaning limitations on the amount of carbon that you can, expel into the atmosphere. Now think about this one for a minute. If combustion engines are the problem because they put out fossil fuels, but we switch to electric cars, however, most of our power plants in America are coal-fired, which puts out pollution, right? Fossil fuels into the atmosphere. What difference are we really making? Because sure, you could say, well, getting all the cars off the road will make a huge difference. You're probably right. But if everyone has an electric car that's a plug-in and everybody plugs it in, our power grid has a lot more demand. And so a lot more electricity needs to be made, which means a lot more smoke coming out of the pipes. So you'll want to think one step beyond maybe the obvious, right? So we see the obvious, but is it really going to get at what we're trying to accomplish? And if you can get that far, you're really going to help your clients out, because chances are they're not going to think about that extra step. Back to this slide, thanks, Elle. We're going to next talk about comparative advantages as an organizational strategy. So for that one, it's almost like you're weighing your pros and cons, right? I like to make a pro-con list about almost any big decision I make, and I try to separate my feelings from it and go with the list, and that's the way I roll. You win some, you lose some. But with this one, the idea is that you want to think of maybe an issue out there and something that should be done, and then two different ways of doing it. And that's going to help you understand which one of those approaches might be better. So to stay with the same idea, we could look at global warming or climate change. Some people on the left say that we have to limit the amount of carbon we put out into the atmosphere, and that's the way we should solve the problem. Others will say we should simply adapt to climate change and make technology help us survive warmer temperatures. And then you can look at each one closer. So on the left, the pros of the carbon output reduction is that it's long-term and it solves the problem, not just a symptom. But there are pros to the other one as well. If we do this new technology approach, then we're not going to worry about our energy needs being met, because, we're going to be able to still put out that carbon to make those coal-fired power plants. And we know that jobs aren't going to be lost, because if anything, we're going to gain jobs making these new technology aids that are going to help us survive. Well, reducing carbon sounds like a great idea, but there are some cons. It's expensive. It's going to cost more to manufacture, which means your products will cost more. Some people will lose jobs, so there's going to be some job uncertainty associated with it. And if we cap carbon, that means we'll cap the amount of production our coal-fired power plants can produce when it comes to electricity. And are we going to be able to survive with that reduced energy at our fingertips when we plug things in or flip the switch? And okay, let's look at the other plan, adapting to global warming. Now that means it's easier on us because we don't have to change much. We just need to implement the new technology. But what's What are the cons? First of all, it's short term. If things continue to get worse, will the technology continue to help us into the future? That's future uncertainty. And it's expensive because, new technology is always expensive. That's why, electric cars are 40% more than gas cars, according to a student speech in 2021. Just to give you my citation. But the comparative advantages approach is something that I know Dr. Johnstone likes. It is something that I guess I would say the layperson really likes too. Now, the layperson really likes Monroe's, but they don't understand that Monroe's they're being Monroe'd, if you will, because you're not going to explain the steps, right? The 5 steps, you're just going to do it without labels. And then it really is effective, but it's not really detected. Effective, but not detected. This one is clear. Like, okay, I'm showing you both of these. The danger here is that if the audience can think of an additional con that you didn't list, they'll be thinking to themselves, why didn't you mention that? Are you trying to hide it? What's your real motive here? Oh, the pros. I can think of pros of the plan that you don't recommend, but you didn't list those. I guess you wanted a straw man fallacy. So there are dangers here. So you have to give each approach its due diligence. You have to really get in there and give an honest representation of the positioning that the people take when they really subscribe to these different plans. So we have problem, cause, solution. Could take the cause out and just be problem, solution. Comparative advantages. And then, of course, our bread and butter, Cassidy's Monroe's motivated sequence. So just a quick background on this. This was from Alan Monroe, who was a psychologist at Purdue University. In the 1930s, the U.S. government put out a call, basically, for communication professionals to come up with a way to increase the amount of folks, the amount of Americans who were getting vaccinated against known disease at the time. So at this point in our country's history, we were coming out of the Great Depression. And so people during that time had stopped doing things that cost money besides just surviving. And that included going to the doctor. So people were not getting their kids immunized against diseases, and that was a problem that the government noticed. So Alan Monroe came up with a plan, and it was to convince parents to get their kids vaccinated. So it is the 5 steps that we saw, and it became the sequence, and it was very successful. Now it's been sort of, some may say borrowed, some may say hijacked by the advertising industry. And boy, most of the call now commercials, right? 1-800-CALL-NOW. Those are Monroe's motivated sequence. The prime example is the Arms of the Angel ASPCA commercial. So if you watch that one, I know you're probably familiar. The first thing you hear is the song start. And if you look at your screen, you see pictures of abused or pitiful animals. And so that grabs your attention. Then they put some words on the screen. And it's every day this amount of animals are beaten or neglected. This many don't survive. So clear problem. Then you hear Sarah McLachlan's voice because she tells you, hi, I'm Sarah McLachlan. And she walks you through ways you can help. And that is by joining the ASPCA and donating 12.5 cents a day or whatever it is. You could save this dog. Now we're getting into visualization. That's right, because it's look at all the benefits you'll do, and we'll send you this free t-shirt with a picture of a dog on it that you'll want to wear everywhere. Oh my God. And then call to action is immediate. And so right now, call this number. There are the steps. That's the commercial. There are others that do this in sort of a modified way, but that's the clearest one. So if you're working with a client and they're just not getting Monroe's motivated sequence, pull up the Arms of the Angel commercial for the ASPCA, and that is Monroe's motivated sequence. But again, for the new folks especially, the steps to Monroe's are the attention step. That will be sort of like the attention getter. The next 3 points will be your body points. So main point 1, or the second step, need or problem. Main point 2, or the third step, is the satisfaction or the solution. Main point 3, or the Fourth step is the visualization, or sort of how things will change once the problem is solved with your plan or the need is satisfied with your plan. And then last is a call to action, which goes at the very end of the speech, just before or after the closure. So once everything is done. Let's take a little closer look at these. So attention, there's lots of different ways to get attention in a speech, but our big ones are stories, something that's a little shocking, like a fact or a statistic that the audience may not recognize. And then, of course, using questions. Again, see the Dr. Johnstone note. The questions are the easiest one to go with. So, maybe let folks know that it is an attention getter, but there are other more effective ones that are going to probably set them up for more success. Now, if your client wants to do questions, direct them towards show of hands questions, because that gets the audience physically involved. Although it seems minor, it is important, because now they're thinking and they're physically moving. They're more invested. They're going to likely stay connected to you a little longer. Now, the statistics and stats, those are great. I mean, the prime example I always use is if you're giving a speech on STD awareness in college students, and you want to convince them, by the end of this speech, you should set up an appointment to get tested for STDs. Then you could say that, and it's a true one, 1 in 4 college students have an STD. 1 in 4 has an STD. And then you can look around the room or your Zoom screen and count, right? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Ooh. People are really going to feel that, right? Is it you? Look to your left. Look to your right. Now look at the person right in front of you. If there's no one in front of you, look right behind you. Now think of yourself. Is it you? Are you sure? Hi, my name's Carl, right? I mean, you just hit them with that. That's gonna work. The other one, of course, is the story. Man, Monroe's is well set up for a story. Humans love stories. We're natural storytellers. We used it before we could ever write anything down. And so with that, you've got different ways that you can come up with a story and different types of stories. So what I'll say is this. One, if you come up with a story, you make up a story, that's okay. It's called hypothetical illustration. It's not a lie, unless you say that it's real or you imply that it's about you or someone you know. You can't do that. Another thing that you should know here is that you could find stories from somewhere else, like a news story, and you can summarize that and use that as your story if it seems appropriate. And last, personal stories are the best if, 1, you have it that relates to your topic, and 2, you can effectively deliver it. So, you don't want to you want to tell your client not to get too emotional, maybe if they're talking about, God forbid, like an assault and they themselves had been assaulted. That's a super powerful story, but could they get through it in front of a class without having an emotional response that would prevent them from being successful? If that's the case, then they need to stay away from it, but that's only for them. We can't know that. Only they can know that. Now, once you decide on a story, if that's where it goes, the 2 big ways that you might do this are misdirections and cliffhangers. And so the misdirection is when it seems like a story is about one thing and it's going in a certain direction, and then out of nowhere, it just does an abrupt turn and goes in a different direction. My favorite example of this is something about a grandmother. So Ethel was an 80-year-old grandmother who lived alone. She didn't live alone because her kids didn't want her. She lived alone because she loved her independence. She had a great routine, and she still had some quality of life left in her. But that life was about to end. Because this morning, as Ethel was making her breakfast, as she did every morning, a killer moved closer to striking. As she finished her breakfast and stood up from the table to go put her dishes in the sink, that's when the killer struck. Without warning, without sound, quick and final. Hi, I'm Carl, and today I want to talk to you about heart disease. Right? She had a heart attack, but people are thinking like, oh my God, who's this guy hiding in the closet? So that is an example of misdirection. It feels like they're going to go in one way, but then they do a quick whiplash change. The cliffhanger is just what it sounds like. Start a story, get us to a great moment where we're wondering, oh, what's going to happen next? Stop the story, give the speech, and then finish the story at the closure. So with this one, it could be something along the lines, and you've probably heard me talk about this one. I was doing a speech competition, judging it in Tennessee, and a guy talked about truth, personal truth, religious truth, scientific truth. And he says, about 8 years ago, there was a family who immigrated to America in search of the American dream. The mother and father and their little boy had high hopes. The mother and father worked full-time, 2 jobs at a time, so they could make ends meet and give their son a better life. Well, the little boy decided he wanted to help, and he saw a rusty lawnmower in the neighbor's backyard. So he asked the owner if he could use that lawnmower, if he could clean it up and get it working. And the guy said, "Kid, you can have it. If you can make it work, it's yours." So over a couple weeks, when his dad had a free moment or two, they worked together on this lawnmower and got it working. Well, the little boy started mowing front lawns in the neighborhood. Now, it wasn't anything like this little child of 8 years old is going to be your landscaper, but it was sort of a cute factor. The neighbors would give him a couple dollars when he would come and mow the front yard. Well, one day he was mowing, and he turned the lawnmower to make his last pass through the yard. He felt a loud pop, or he heard a loud pop, felt pain in his leg as he fell to the ground. When he looked down, his right foot was missing at the ankle. The blade had come out of the machine in the back and severed his foot at the ankle. The neighbor heard him scream. She came out, grabbed him and his foot, took them to the hospital where the mother met them. The doctor came out and said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to take your son's leg off." And she said, "I don't think that's the truth. Hi, my name is," and blah, blah, blah. Then at the end, he comes out and basically another doctor came in and he gave a second opinion. This second opinion said, "We can save the foot and we can save the leg, and he won't use it normally ever again, fully functional, but he'll have it and he'll be complete if that's what you want." Then the guy stepped out from behind the podium and says, "I'm so glad my mother did that for me those years ago, because I'm still standing on my own 2 feet in front of you today." And that's a great use of the story. Got us to a good, important sort of cliffhanging moment. What? The leg? What happened? It was just his foot. Now we're going to stop it and we're going to finish. I, of course, being Carl, didn't believe him. I thought he was making it up and saying it was about him, which is a violation of the rules of that competition. And so I asked to see his ankle. After he looked confused, he showed me his ankle, and he was not lying. And I was very embarrassed and never again invited to judge speaking competitions at the state level in Tennessee. So, what are you going to do? But that was a wonderful use of story. So make sure whatever route they take, they're doing something effective to get the attention of that audience. Then the next step is to describe a problem, and it needs to be specific and stated clearly. We can't have them assuming that everyone agrees with them that something is a problem. So if it's a political topic and it's like, all right, so the obvious problem is the Democrats are in control of Congress and the presidency, and that needs to change. Like, wait, no, I think that's wonderful. So some of these problems, though, will be clear that there are two sides, and they need to make their case as to why it is problematic as they see it. But some other problems are sort of understood to be bad, but that doesn't mean you get a free pass. So if you're talking about, again, abuse of any sort, child abuse, elderly abuse, sexual abuse, you can't just say, okay, so the need here is that we have an abuse problem in America with this many people being abused. Now let's solve that problem. Wait a minute. Convince us that it's a problem, even though we sort of already know it. Don't assume that. Tell us what abuse leads to. It leads to cycles of abuse. It leads to physical injuries that can be potentially life-threatening. It leads to lowered self-esteem. And then what do those things lead to? All right, so take it a few steps further than, just, oh yeah, that's a problem, obviously. Think about global warming or climate change again. If I sell air conditioners and you're hot, I'm not really worried about it. Now, that's a business decision as opposed to a human decision. But you see the point in that even if something is big and impactful as climate change is brought up, it still needs to be clarified as to why it's a problem. Who's it a problem for? How serious is this problem? That kind of stuff needs to be answered. So Janine brought up in training that Vivian Nystrom, who used to be a consultant at the lab before she graduated, said that she said we call it the Nystrom approach. But she said that with the problem or the need, you have to tell people what the problem is and why it's a problem. Then for the solution or satisfaction, you need to tell them what you're going to do to solve the problem and how that will solve the problem. So let's move on. With a step-by-step plan, you can solve a problem and people can actually visualize it happening. So what you need to make sure that your plan does is address everything that was in that problem. So, whether that is, just stopping or dealing with climate change, or if that is sort of a two-parter with the combustion engines and climate change, make sure that it actually is solving that problem. Just like we saw combustion engines versus coal-fired power plants, doesn't really solve the problem. It maybe changes the source of the problem or slightly improves the problem, but it's still a problem. Let's look at, we'll come right to it here in just a second, but with visualization, we're going to review this in a minute. Remember, this is the future outlook. If that problem is solved with your specific plan, tell us about the benefits that we will see. What I've got there in bold is that your visualization should be a mirror image of the need or the problem main point. And here's how that might look. Sorry, I used paper instead of making this in some typed form. Let's say we've got our body points laid out like this. And this is something that you might do with the client to help them understand how these three kind of are dependent on one another. So you've got the need or the problem. Let's say we decided that students aren't coming to the speech lab, and that's a problem because without us, they are inexperienced, they're ill-prepared, they may have low or falsely high confidence, they don't have a thorough understanding of speaking, and they don't have a good feedback system for practicing. Okay, so what do we need to do? Well, we need to get them into the lab. Now, I have gone further here, and you'll see why all of these are a problem. Sorry, the dogs are barking. Levi's back home. If it was a class, I'd stop it, but you all know the deal. So with that, the problem can be laid out and clearly established as a problem. Then you can, I'm going to skip down, solve that problem. And here's my solution. We're going to get students in the lab. The first step, do some research, find out the best approach to getting people to come anywhere on a college campus. And that's already been done, and we know the answer, and that is faculty need to require it as part of a course. Great, so now we need to not get students into the lab. Our whole situation just shifted. Now we need to focus on getting faculty to require it. So see, if we said, okay, the problem is students don't come to the lab, the solution is having faculty require them to come in. Now, let's look at how much better it will be. No, that's not it. How are you going to take the next steps? So we need to get into faculty meetings. Once we're in those, we need to be persuasive and let them know what we have to offer and that we are a valuable service. Then we need to make sure that we can actually handle a capacity of students coming that we might see if these professors all send in their students. And then last, we have to have a plan for maintenance, and that is training to ongoing training to maintain this sort of level of service. Now, if we solved that problem with that plan, look how I've just got straight lines over from my issues with the problem, issues with the issue, I suppose. But, numbered 1 through 5, you see the same right over on the visualization with those arrows. So before they were inexperienced, well, if they come in, they're going to get experience, but also experience with well-trained consultants. Number 2, they weren't very prepared. Well, they come in, they get that one-on-one attention and focus, and they're more prepared. Number 3, they didn't have much confidence or they had falsely high confidence. Well, you go over, and now they can have a greater they can have an appropriate level of confidence. And if they have low confidence, we can help them build it. Number 4, they didn't understand maybe the syllabus of the assignment or speaking in general. So now they come in and see us, they leave with a better understanding. And then last, before the problem was they didn't practice or they didn't do it the right way. Now they know the right way to practice. They can do it with us, and we can help them develop muscle memory as a speaker. So that's, if taking nothing else from this whole Monroe's thing, take this in that you're going to make straight lines over from your need or your problem over to your visualization. It's great the way it works. And I really want you to use this sort of design on paper or a whiteboard or a Jamboard or a Word doc for all I care, PowerPoint. But show the student what you mean, and this is one way that's very clear to do. All right. The last step in Monroe's is a call to action, and that should be immediate, realistic, and appropriate. So you do not want your client telling people, well, when you get your first job after college, you should, no, we need to do it today. You don't want them to say things like, right after this class, donate $100 to the thing. No, college students, not going to happen. There's not $100 laying around to donate. So you're more than likely going to have clients end up signing petitions, sending an email to a representative of some sort, whether that's government or the school or whatever, or learning more. So go to a website and read the thing, tell your friends about something. Those sorts of things are immediate, realistic, and appropriate. All right. As we move into the final few weeks of the semester, we're going to see a few special occasion and or impromptu speeches. A couple professors, I know Lori Yeager does this. Isaac may do this, even though it's not for speech, I don't think. But you're going to have some folks that want us to help on special occasion or impromptu speeches. What you need to remember here, first of all, is what that means. So a special occasion might be an awards ceremony where you introduce someone, or you accept the award, or you are presenting the award. You never know. Could be a eulogy. It could be a best man or bride or maid of honor speech. You never know. And so the key here is that it's going to take the same basic form as any other speech. You still need 3 clear parts. However, there are some differences. It's less rigid in the structure. So there's not really a need for a preview and review of main points, because it's going to usually be fairly brief. You probably don't need to do a personal introduction, because, if you're in any of those situations that we just discussed, people probably know your name. The transitions can be softer. It doesn't need to be now that move to, now that move to. It could be just a simple next, which we can't do in major speeches, but these can work. But remember, through all of this, it's very situation dependent, meaning that whatever the specific person is going to specifically, like it could be a wedding, but what kind of wedding? What's the family like? Are they laid back and they love to laugh, or are they pretty straight-laced and a little stuffy? That all matters when you're helping with this sort of presentation. Quick word about the impromptu end of things. Impromptu is just a speech that's done with very, very limited or no preparation. When I say very limited, it's usually 2 minutes or less, and you don't know what you're going to be talking about until 2 minutes before you speak. If this is the case, just remind clients that they need to envision the structure of a speech, and you can show them how to do this. In English class, they called it a keyhole format, right? Because it sort of had the top, the big body, and then the bottom, which was a mirror of the top. But introduction, body, conclusion, intro and conclusion are basically the same. They're just mirrored. That's it. And if they can do that, they can probably visualize their content as they speak flowing in some sort of an outline. That's a more of an advanced feature, but if they've got to do it, they've got to do it. And that's how we can help. All right. Last up here with Justin and the weekend. Actually, it's not last. It's almost last. We're going to talk about the negotiation technique used to get students back into the lab. So remember that at the end of every consultation, every one of them, that doesn't have an assignment due on the same day or early the next day, try to get them to come back in for more consultation. It's really something that, yeah, we do need numbers, and that's important for us as a service, but it's more important that they do well and they feel empowered as a speaker. And the more they come in and practice with us, the better feedback they get, which means the more empowered they should be. But the approach to getting them to do this is from the FBI. It's their actual hostage negotiation technique. We call it the bad boyfriend technique because bad boyfriends use it, and I'll show you how in just a minute. But the overall design is that you want the person you're talking to answer one question, the first question with yes, the second question with no, and then give them sort of a false choice to take action. Sort of like, you can take this action or who knows what'll happen. So for the FBI, the person doing the negotiating might say, Justin, I know you're a good person, but people just don't understand you, do they? That's right. Yes. I know, man. I know that hurts. But listen, you've already been hurt. You don't want anyone else to go through all that pain that you've been through, do you? No, okay, so why don't you put that thing down and let's talk? Right? So that's their approach to dealing with armed, barricaded suspects. The bad boyfriend might say, babe, listen, sometimes I just don't know if your heart is even in this. I mean, you love me, right? Yeah. And I love you, and you don't want to leave, do you? Well, no. Well, let's take this to the next level then. Maybe you've heard that one. And for us, I know every point counts in class, and you want to do as well as possible, right? Yeah, right. Okay, and this is good. It's getting better. We've made a lot of progress, but do you think it will be 100% perfect? Probably. No. Right. So let's set up another appointment for you. When's good? Not, so do you want to set up? No, just so we're going to set up another appointment for you. When do you want to come back? And that will get them back in the door more. We've seen that in past semesters where we saw a huge bounce from everyone doing this every time. And I want you to do this at the end of every session that it's relevant. So they're not going to go and present, then they don't need to come back. It's going to be too late. All right, Janine, take it away with PowerPoint. Thank you. So with PowerPoint, what I'll tell you is that for the new folks, there's another video coming where anyone can watch it, but it'll just be about PowerPoint. That'll be next week or so. We may take 1 week off from this because NACC is this weekend, or not this weekend, the 19th and 20th. So with that, remember, if a client comes in and they want to work on their PowerPoint, we only do that if they have an outline put together. If they don't, we want to work on that first. The problem is that when you start with a PowerPoint and have no outline or very minimal outline, you're sort of making it up on the go here, and you're going to have to go back and change things. And it's just much easier to draw a line through something on a piece of paper and replace it with something else than it is to redo all your slides. So make sure they've got this the outline done so that then you can just take it straight from the outline onto the PowerPoint, and that's it. It's not that hard. It's very easy, in fact, once they get the outline finished. For content on slides, remember that less is more. So you don't need a lot of words on there. I would have one image on each slide at least, but you don't need to, overload it with anything, whether it's images or words. There shouldn't be any punctuation on a PowerPoint. That's a good sort of rule of thumb, except, in rare cases in question marks. But if you're not using a full sentence, you don't need a period. So that's one check you might use. Tell them to remember that when they're the speaker, with or without a PowerPoint, they are the star in that room at that moment. That's who everyone's looking at. And the PowerPoint, if they have one, is just there as their assistant. It's just there to help keep the audience on track with where they are. It's not for the speaker to use as a crutch. In other words, to use it as notes and look at the screen. And if you don't put enough content on there to where it's overloaded, there's nothing for you to read as the client. And so now the client won't read their PowerPoint because there's nothing to read. That's what we want. We want that audience just to see where we are in the speech so that they can follow along. Last but not least, don't advise clients to use animations. And if they do use animations, advise them to change those to what's called stacking slides. And this is when you make a slide. So if I wanted to make each one of these lines on this slide appear, and let me just go ahead and do it. We can jump out. We're making a video. I would do this. I would go ahead. Let's see how many lines there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to duplicate it. 1. So now we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 extra. Then I'm going to come and work backwards. So I'll start here, and that will have everything. This one will have everything except that. Okay, the next one won't have the last 2. The next one won't have the last 3. The next one won't have the last 4. Oops. Okay, the next one won't have the last 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The next one won't have the last 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we can go here and we can get rid of all this. So let me put it back in this mode. So you could say in the speech, all right, let's talk about PowerPoint a little bit. The first thing you need to know is blah, blah, blah. The next thing is this. 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 The next thing is that. All right. So those aren't animations. Those are stacked slides. And that is something that is going to be less taxing on the computer. It's harder to screw it up because you can see it all instead of just like, okay, 1, 2, and then this one. It's cut and dry. You know, we don't need animations. Now, miscellaneous announcements from me and Michael Jackson, the king of pop. Few things. 1, session notes. Don't forget that session notes are important, that they are written for the client so that they can have a record of what we've done, and that they are there for the professor if they're going to get those session notes. The other thing with session notes is think about always adding in a link to something on our website that will be helpful. So we have lots of good stuff on there. I'll show you that in just a minute if you're not familiar. But we have video links and guide sheets. And if you can link to those, that's great. Here's why. Not because like, oh, we have it, we should let them know. That's part of it. But one is that it helps the student because now they've got something to sort of fall back on or remind them of what you discussed. And 2, the professor sees, if the notes go to them, that we not only helped, but we gave them this reference, this guide, if you will. Then if the student does poorly and the professor talks to them and says, well, you know, what happened on that last speech? And they say, and it will happen, well, the speech lad told me to do it that way. No, he didn't. But that's fine because then the professor, if they had the notes, could say, yeah, but they gave you the guide sheet. I mean, that's not how it was on the guide sheet. And that's going to make a big difference. So try to put in a link to something relevant, not as anything, but something relevant on every session if possible. Pardon me. Okay, the next one, oral source citations. So when students are citing their sources in the speech, the key thing here to remember is 2 things, really. 1, check on the professor's preference. Look in the syllabus, ask the student, did your professor say anything about how you should do this? Some may want, you know, a full-on APAS citation. I mean, just everything. Okay, this is from Brown, Carl J. in 2019. The title of the article was this. No, I don't think so. If there is no preference, then here are the 2 key things. Publication, meaning the journal name, the news agency, CNN, New York Times, whatever, a website, according to Grand Valley's Honor College website, something like that. And then the date, or the date it was last updated, or the date you accessed it, if no other date is presented. That's the order you want those to be in, by the way. Look for a date that it was written. If you don't find that, look for a date that the website was updated. And if you can't find that, then you go with your access date. What I've also wanted to tell you here, just with journal names, is that be sure that when you're helping clients cite these sources, they may pull out their source to like a journal article and say, okay, so I'm going to cite this one. So all I need to say is, according to a 2010 article from EBSCOhost. No, EBSCOhost is a search engine for databases. Same thing with JSTOR, Academic Search Ultimate, those sorts of things. Those are not the journals. Those are the databases. The one that I hear the most recently is according to the journal from the American Psychological Association. They have a lot of journals too. That'd be like saying according to the journal from the National Communication Association. I think we have 12, right, that are associated with the actual organization. So cite the journal name. It often will have the word journal in it. It may be abbreviated in a way that makes it unclear. Just Google the abbreviation and you should find it. Last thing I'll say is that if you find your client is having a hard time with sources, don't feel like you have to put out that fire. Call for backup, and those are the research consultants. That's their job. If they had a client say, okay, I got to do this research and then I have to talk about it for 10 minutes, they're going to send them to us. So let's send them to them. We've already got them in. We've got the number. They've got our information as far as like how to come back and see us if they need us, but let the other folks do their job that they're paid to do. Last thing on this one is summer 2021 at the lab. It will probably be virtual again, even if it's not. So there's a chance that we will be in the lab as far as like the employees, me and potentially Hannah. And sorry, I still didn't change the T. Sorry, Hannah, this should be an S. And Brady. Those are the only two people who have shown an interest in working in the summer. It could be the case that everything is just completely virtual, or it could be the case that we meet in the lab but do virtual consultations. And if that's the case, we won't meet every day. We'll just meet on some days when we have other things that we need to accomplish for the lab over the summer. But stay tuned for more on that. So in this training, we talked about open link etiquette, that it's a public access situation we're in now. Anybody can come in and see us at any time. ER triage, remember, A, B, C, D. So make sure that they have all the points that are there, all the three main parts. The body is there and it makes sense with transitions between main points. The content is coherent and cited. And D, delivery can be the last thing that we really focus on. For persuasion, we talked about some different ways to be persuasive, including comparative advantages and problem solution or problem cause solution. We then focused in on Monroe's motivated sequence with the 5 steps of attention, need, satisfaction, visualization, and call to action. We touched on special occasion speeches and the fact that you should keep them sort of on the same level as everything else. They should take the same form as most other speeches, but it's very situational in terms of how formal or informal to be. We talked about getting people back in for follow-up appointments and, letting them know that you think they're doing great and they want to do better, right? Yes. Do you think this is as good as you could ever possibly do? No. Well, then when do you want to come back? It's the hard sell. PowerPoint, don't forget some of those tips. There'll be more coming. I said tips, those tools. There'll be more coming soon, probably in a couple weeks for the new folks especially, but we could all learn and benefit from a refresher. And then, of course, NACC 2021's from training when we actually met together on Zoom, but it's neither here nor there now. So thank you for all you do. Keep up the good work. Really, I said this at training, so if you were there, but I really respect everyone's resilience and ability to, push through. And, it's great to see. I'm happy that we are surviving this, that you're still here, and I appreciate it. All right, I'm going to stop the video. That is it for this week, and we'll have more soon.